All right, so welcome to the afternoon and welcome to System Center Universe 2016. Thank you, Pete, for your introduction. Thank you again for the marketing team to putting this entire thing together. Thank you to the audience that's out here today. As Pete mentioned, this is something that I have been working on for a long time with actually quite a few different people. So today's topic is called Doing More with Less, and the strategies around that, as you can see. So as background, if you're not familiar with who I am now a 10-year Microsoft MVP. I'm also a Veeam Vanguard. I've been speaking at TechEd, MMS, Dev Connections, and other ones. I'm also an Unleashed co-author and contributor. So that's all stuff that pretty much everybody knows. But to let you know kind of a little bit of behind the scenes of where I came from and how I got here today and how this all impacts what we're working on, I actually have worked in a whole lot of different jobs across my career, all right? So I started as a programmer. So how many people out there code for a living? Good, I'm in the right room. There's nobody out here who codes for a living, it appears, or nobody who can raise their hand. Each of those possible. So I started as a coder, and I learned very quickly the fact that I could not code phenomenally well, and I moved into systems. Life's much better there. So I have worked in in-house IT. I have been part of a help desk in the past, multiple help desk environments. I've been an IT director as we went through and developed our first product during the .com timeframe. So what I'm going to be talking through today is a combination of the things that I've learned across all of those different years, and then to showcase you something that we're going to be announcing today. So today's agenda is this. We're going to talk at a high level about what is today's IT world really like. And then we're going to hit some specific strategies that I would recommend for how do you win in the environment that we've got today. So for starters, what are some of the biggest challenges in a modern IT organization? The reality is some of this depends upon where you're coming from. So for background, y'all are physically here. I get this, okay? Most likely you're here. And if you're seeing me in the physical room right now, you're here. But what I'm discussing is not where are we at today in terms of physically. I'm talking about where are we at today from an IT perspective. That's where we're at most of the time from an IT perspective. Somewhere between a rock and a hard place of what the expectations are of what we actually need to do within our jobs. So as part of that, let's look at this from the standard project management triangle that you've got here. So you've got time and cost and scope, and those things impact quality. Now granted, if there's any PMs in the audience, you would recognize the fact that there's more than the three factors that actually impact things here. But I'm going to use this triangle as to kind of give it an analogy to what we're seeing and expecting within IT on a regular basis. Here's what we have today. Do more work. Do it with less time and do it with less money. Realistically, is there anybody out there that feels like, we got all the people that we need to be able to do this, we got resources all over, we got infinite budgets? Because the answer in 20 plus years of IT consulting that I've done is, it's never that way. It is always this push of get more done, do it quicker, do it more efficiently, use less money and the rest. That's exactly where the push is at. So the challenge that we've got is how do we strive, and better than that, how do we actually thrive in a situation like that? So that's what today's focus of the presentation is about. So our strategies to win and thrive in a modern IT environment. And you're going to see that hopefully there will be at least a chuckle occasionally from some of the ones that I picked here. But what I'm trying to showcase here is that you can not only do well and strive, but you can really thrive and change how you're doing your business by looking at it from a different angle and different approaches. So the first big thing on this list is maximize. You want to maximize the tools of the benefits of the tools that you already have right now. Let's start with a basic one based on my experiences working as a consultant, both in operations manager and configuration manager. How many people right now have a fully automated patch management strategy? Okay, I got at least a couple of partial hands there. Okay. How many people would be able to tell that all of your systems are monitored and that you know what's going on with it? Again, a couple, mostly, not, massive hand raise up, but potential, right? The point of this is, in essence, that the tools that are out there and the things that you're learning today will help you to be able to do more with less by utilizing the tool sets that you've got. So attending conferences like this, where you get a chance to be able to sit down and learn more about Configuration Manager, Operations Manager, new upcoming technologies and the rest, that's something that is an opportunity that I'm glad that you all are embracing, both here physically in person, at our simulcast locations, and virtually. But if you want to step back and really think about this for a minute, there's a lot of the things that we just take for granted. How many people have been in IT so long that you remember the days when you had to log into every server and look in the event logs? Yeah. Okay. We don't do that, or I'm hoping not many of us actually do that anymore nowadays. Wow. Pardon me. So hopefully we're not doing that nowadays anymore. So we're taking some of those things for granted and rolling with it. The second big thing is shelfware. Shelfware doesn't help anyone. So what the problem with shelfware in essence is when you buy a software package but you don't leverage it completely, or you don't leverage it at all in essence. And you might be thinking shelfware does help somebody, it helps the vendor that you bought it from, but it really doesn't, because the reality of the situation is if you put something out there as just shelfware, you're not going to renew it, you're not going to continue with it, so it's pretty much money lost for them in the long term also. Then the final piece on this from a maximized perspective is simplify and consolidate. Oftentimes, almost every client that I go to, we have multiple disparate monitoring solutions that exist out there, multiple patch management and other management solutions. Take a look at these and really see if there's redundancies that you can remove. From a collaboration perspective, that's the second key point I wanted to bring across today, is this is a great time to get involved in the community. So if you want to know who some of the communities are right now, so as an example, you've got Rod Trent in the back there, who runs My IT Forum. You've got Pete Zerger with System Center Central, formerly with System Center Central. You've got lots of forums that exist out there, lots and lots of user groups. The spectrum or collage of the different logos that you see out here are just examples of many places out there in the community that you can get resources, because you do not want to try to do this all on your own. If you're doing this all on your own, you are fighting way, way too hard to do what you're doing on a daily basis. So your online conferences like this, your actual physical conferences like we're doing here, great chance to be able to learn, so I'm glad you're here for it. The second thing is, oftentimes it's a really good idea to just get a second perspective. So I know everybody in here, if you're doing IT and have been for a long time, you're probably really smart at what you do. But the reality is, nobody's going to know every single technology, and you're not going to know it to the level of depth that a subject matter expert is going to have. So as an example, I have been working in Operations Manager now for well over a decade. And I will be the first one to say there are plenty of people that I know that know a whole lot more about Operations Manager in certain areas than I do, or I ever will. Because every product or component you work with, in essence, has an infinite level of depth of how deep you can learn that. I know this group here, it's probably a lot of Config Manager people. You can state the fact, the reality, you could work Configuration Manager your entire career and still learn something on a regular basis. Unless you're Wally Mead, and then you already know everything there is to know about Configuration Manager. But what I'm bringing across here is the point that you want to look for somebody who is a subject matter expert with the heart of a teacher. You don't want to bring in a consultant or somebody who's going to sit there with you, do the entire deployment for you, hand you a document, and then walk away. That's a waste of everybody's time. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of the consultant's time. And it's just not a good win. What you want to do instead is you want to work with somebody who's going to walk you through and teach you the steps that you need to do to be able to work with those technologies. So think about it from that perspective. There are times that you're going to want to just leverage a subject matter expert to be able to gain additional skills temporarily as you're moving forward. Third main point, offloading. So there are multiple times that it makes a lot of sense to be able to take something that's on your plate and just move it off to the side and let somebody else handle it. So the example that I was given by a friend recently is in his work day, he's got a stack of things on his left hand, which is all the things he wants to do. He has a stack of things on his right hand, is all the things that he needs to do. And the problem is the things on the left hand are never getting done because the things on the right hand are always taking too much time away. So instead of assuming, my RT organization needs to do everything and we need to do it all in-house within our group, instead step back and really think about this for a minute. Let's give a couple of good use cases. Let's say you've got SharePoint, but you don't necessarily do enough work with SharePoint that you need to hire a full-time SharePoint administrator. What you can do with this instead is leverage somebody from a part-time perspective. It's much more cost-effective. You don't have to hire somebody to be able to do that, and you can offload that. Just take it off your plate and let that handle it. So look at this from a managed services perspective. Don't see that as a threat to IT. It's a great augment to IT, because what it lets you do is it lets you take that stack of things that you really want to do and push off some of the things that you just don't want to have to do on a daily basis. The second thing is a shift, and a big shift in the industry, to what we at Catapult Systems call solutions as a service. So examples of this you're going to see: disaster recovery as a service. So I heard, I think, at least one person when I was going through conversations today, where somebody was talking about how they're going to do DR for their entire site. How are you going to develop a DR plan for it and the rest of it? So Microsoft's got a great solution called Azure Site Recovery. Those are the types of things that you can do where you're actually making DR as a service in essence. It's a great value add. And by the way, and this is not a sales pitch for ASR, I actually didn't even have this in my presenter notes, but ASR, you actually can test the full recovery of it to validate that it works, and you're not even getting billed at that point in time. It's when you recover that you get billed for it. So you're basically able to build out your entire recovery data center. Desktops as a service, we got that. Intranet as a service. I mentioned the SharePoint example. A lot of companies don't necessarily have enough SharePoint work to keep somebody busy full time, but if you can take that and offload that as a service, let somebody else manage it and maintain it for you, that opens up the capability for you to, again, focus on what you want to be doing within your organization. The next big one is embrace the cloud. This is, and you heard this with Jeremy's discussion, and it's key from a Microsoft perspective, and it's key for me. So I'll divert here again from script and actually tell you all a story here. So there may be a few people out there who have read my blog, and at one point in time, I went on a sabbatical. So I took several weeks away. I put a router block on pretty much all things IT, so I didn't have to read email anymore or anything else, and I just stayed away from all of it and tried to figure out, you know what, do I want to keep doing IT type related work? Is this something that I really want to do? The cloud has changed everything that we're doing, and if it hasn't changed it yet, it's going to be changing what we're going to do. And I'll tell you the result of that. After the 3 weeks, I did come back and I realized that I'm pumped up for this. I'm ready for the change. It's beginning to come into industries, and it's something that I'm now willing to embrace. But it does take time to be able to do that big shift. We've been so used to this concept of, I have a data center on-prem. Now, I'm gonna walk through that for a second, because it's changed. Because if we just walk a little bit further back in time to where we were, it used to be, I have a physical box that I bought. And on that physical box, I've installed an operating system, and on that operating system, I've installed an application. And that's how I do business. Those of you who have been in the industry as long as I have, you're very familiar with how this worked. That was a different time frame. We've shifted from there. So we've moved from this area of, I have a box with an app, then we embraced virtualization. Okay, so from a virtualization perspective, now I have a bigger box with a whole lot of sub-boxes in that may be running a whole lot of applications. Great, okay. Now we go one step a little further on that. Think about some of the stuff that John talked about earlier today with Nano and the footprint of what you can do. Now I can start putting more and more servers running within the same smaller piece of hardware that was out there. So your ability to be able to get that higher density, your ability to be able to get that higher density, to be able to pull that all together is something that's new. And that's something that you're very much going to gain benefit from the cloud. So if you're working with solutions like that, I highly recommend, think about where you can start. Okay, so if you've got an on-prem data center you're great with, fine, no problem. Look at maybe moving development, test, or even a production piece up to the cloud, try it out, and see if it makes sense. If you're going to be monitoring these things, you're going to want to both use Operations Manager and OMS. So both of those together, like Jeremy was talking about today, it gives you the better together story. I mentioned the disaster recovery concepts for Azure. So these are just examples of how these pieces all play together. And this all ties also back into what we're doing here within System Center Universe. As you're at our conference today where the first two words are System Center. And the reality is some of our content today is on System Center, some of it is not. And the reason why is all these technologies are beginning to come together and they're changing the landscape. So just because it doesn't say System Center doesn't mean it's not completely relevant to what we're doing on a daily basis. The next big point I want to bring up is the concept of economy of scale. It has reached a point where when Microsoft and the other big players are buying so much server capacity that's out there, they're going to be able to bring that economy of scale that it's going to be less expensive to run your workloads up in their cloud than it will be to run them on your on-prem data centers. So those types of changes are going to change how we do our jobs, because it's not going to be our choice to say, hey, I want to run this on-prem. It's going to be our CFOs who are going to look at this and say, hey, how much does it cost to run it here versus how much does it cost to run it here or in a different cloud provider? So you definitely want to think about it from that perspective. That shift won't necessarily be in our hands. I would far rather be empowered and understand those technologies and embrace the technologies versus having somebody make that decision for us in our IT organization. You also get to avoid the challenges of shadow IT. So shadow IT, let me give an example of one that I've seen out there. And this is an interesting one, but a good example in some ways. So I worked with a client where a subsection of their group decided to write a core line of business application. And as opposed to writing it and putting it on their on-prem servers and everything, they ran the entire thing in Azure. They completed the project on time, on budget, done with what they needed to do. Then they called IT and they said, we need you to support this. IT was kind of like, oh? First off, they didn't know what they were doing in the first place, and second off, now they're expected to support it, right? So by embracing these things up front, what you're getting the chance to do is you're getting the chance to be able to jump ahead of that and offer those types of services before they're coming to you and expecting you to bring those types of services. So you can avoid some challenges of shadow IT. And the quote on here, if you haven't seen it already, is if information technology becomes anti-technology, it has doomed itself to irrelevance. And I mean that very much from the perspective that if we're fighting the technologies that are out there, we are going to become irrelevant. We become a roadblock. Our job in IT is to enable the business and to let the business do what the business needs to do and to do it in a cost-effective manner. The extra special, most important piece of this is what the focus of today's conversation is around automation. So the rise of mainstream automation is changing all around us. I have a friend of mine who's in the crowd. I have a friend of mine who's listening through the live cast right now. And these types of things are changing on a daily basis. The list of tech that you see here, including the BB-8 in the corner, I was really hoping I'd actually win the BB-8 because I would have gone like that, you know, this BB-8 here. These are all technologies that are becoming empowered through things like IoT. So you're going to see Lee Berg's doing a presentation later on today where he's going to talk more about IoT. But they're saying the statistics on this, by the Gartner statistics, they're saying that by 2020, there will be 26 billion devices connected to the internet. Let that bake in for just a minute to think how massive of a figure we're talking about there. The amounts of things that you can do with these already are extraordinarily impressive. And when you start to be able to combine together these technologies, you have even more power out of these. So as an example, you got home automation. This is just a small one from home, right? So my son wanted an Amazon Echo for Christmas this year. So he's 17. Why he needs an Amazon Echo? No clue, but he got one. And one of the first things he learned to do with his Amazon Echo was how to connect it to my Nest and how to change the temperature on the floor that he's on. It's a great moment as a dad. I'm slightly happy and slightly upset all at the same time. I'm happy because he's really good at IT, and actually I learned stuff from him. Kind of torqued on the other side of the equation because now he's already figuring out how to work around and change temperatures on me. So those types of things, you can do great stuff. If you have not seen IF by IFTTT, that is a great set of technology. That allows you to be able to quickly and easily take and automate basic level things that you would want to do. As an example, within 5 minutes, I had the UI downloaded. Mine automatically turns the ringer volume off on my phone at a certain time. It automatically brings it back up the next morning, changes my background to the NASA picture of the day and things like this, and it was like 5 minutes to put it together. You grab predefined recipes. There are people that do very, very complicated stuff with IF. And then the IoT world and the wearable stuff is changing the space around us. As an example, Catapult Systems, we actually have a contest that's going on right now. We have 20 different teams that are out there that are actually competing on our number of steps. So when we're doing these team competitions and we're watching as other people out there wearing their wearables are actually knocking us, people like me who don't walk anywhere near as people like Wally Mead on a daily basis. But those things are all beginning to come together, and that's all hitting into the Internet of Things. So what do all of these have in common? If you really step back and look at this and what this means to the market and why do we care, is the commonalities of it. So first off is what they have in common is they automate and simplify a complicated task or a complex task. Let's start with Nest as an example, just because I'm very familiar with them and been working with them for years now. So Nest, how many people had a programmable thermostat in your house and never used it? Okay? How many people have actually used a Nest? So similar, okay. So within the Nest, they have made it so simple that you just set up the program and you go. And it's no big deal. When you want to go away, you tell it on your phone, you're done with it. They took that complex task, they gave you a great visualization on top of it, and they made it intuitive. The if-then example that you see here, that's the one that I mentioned before, the 3 pieces that I do there. The graphic that you're seeing on here as well, this is a small snapshot of a friend of mine's home automation systems where he's automated pretty much everything you can automate in a house. I want to use it as a blueprint for what I do with mine. But what you can do with that is truly amazing, all the way from locking and unlocking doors, taking care of your garage door openers, lights. Dieter, who had the presentation earlier today, he has a separate package that does his blinds. Actually adjusts the blinds based upon the light, where it's at, and all the rest of it, and changes and adapts around the house. So these types of things would seem to have no relevance to what we're talking about today, but they're key to the change in concept and mindset for how we're looking at automation. So then let's look at this, let's step this back and look at this from the Microsoft side of things. So if we're talking about Microsoft automation, what are we looking at there? So we're looking at System Center Orchestrator. So currently 2012 R2 for System Center Orchestrator, great graphical design capability to be able to drag and drop and pull together routines and run things the way you want them to, okay? For those who are wondering, there will be a System Center Orchestrator 2016. So it is coming, it is on the roadmap. There's also a component called Service Management Automation, or SMA. Now SMA is your PowerShell workflow engine, and it does come with Orchestrator, and it allows you to be able to automate things through that. Third piece on this is Azure Automation. So Azure Automation is Microsoft's cloud-based solution for automation, which allows you to be able to run PowerShell and PowerShell workflow, and it also has a GUI designer on it, so you can do GUI-based workflows kind of similar to what you're doing within Orchestrator. So those are the ones that are out there right now and the tool set that they're working with. To quote a friend of mine, and the guy who introduced me, a couple of years ago at SCU, he had the two-word quote there of power, which I had no idea how much it would actually impact me. Learn PowerShell. This is the one thing that I tell people when I'm on the phone or when I'm doing discussions about futures of automations and what you want to do. If you want to work in Orchestrator, that's fine. That's all right. If you want to run in another engine, that's fine also. But what you do want to do is anything you build it in PowerShell, because that's where things are going. Because if you're writing it in something else, you're probably wasting your time in the longer term. And if you want to know which one should you use, I'll tell you my perspective, and everybody's got different ones. I'd start with Azure Automation. If you can't use Azure Automation, fall back to SMA. If you can't use SMA, fall back to Orchestrator. So if you want to know on their tool sets and how to use it, it's a good way to do it. Now, you can do automation with other tools in the stack that you may not be thinking about, so such as Operations Manager. So just so I know if I've got any friends in the crowd out here, how many people are Ops Manager admins? Okay, we've got about 30, 40 of us out there. That's not bad. I could probably pull up your average Ops Manager admin and they could say this exact same thing I'm going to do. All right. We can do diagnostics and recoveries and tasks and things like this within Ops Manager. So we have a level of being able to do things to remediate and to automate. So there's capabilities within that. They're limited in some ways, but there's capabilities to be able to do that there. So as an example, if you have a situation where you have a service that goes offline and comes back online, or won't come back online, you can set up an Ops Manager recovery to automatically restart it. Great, not too difficult. Second one may not be quite as well known. OMS, that Jeremy was showing earlier on today, has an alert preview right now to be able to integrate with Azure Automation. So you can have an alert situation in OMS, such as low disk space condition or whatever condition you're looking for. If that occurs, you can in turn run any of the runbooks that you have within OMS and execute to be able to resolve those issues. So that opens up some good capabilities. Config Manager. Config Manager and PowerShell actually come together very well to be able to do all sorts of interesting things that you may not have been able to do before. So don't assume that if it's not on those top 3 things on the list that it's not part of automation. So let's target this into one specific thought process, which is offboarding and onboarding. So if we look at what is common within an environment, the stats up here are kind of shocking. From the survey that we saw, up to almost 90% of those surveyed still had access to corporate applications after they were no longer with the organization. Almost half retained access to confidential data. In terms of onboarding, only about 13% of companies have an automated onboarding process, and almost half of the people who were terminated from an organization have admitted to actually going back in and getting something out of that organization after they're gone. So this is a scary set of statistics, and it's a common one that we run into. This is something that we've seen in the entire time that I've been working in IT. We've already fought through most of the core things of, we got basic patch management going and we're monitoring things and the rest, but doing things like this where you're really looking at how do I automate an employee onboard or a termination or changes and all those types of things, that's a relatively complex process to go through. Which brings me to today's announcement. So Catapult Systems is officially announcing launch by Catapult Systems today. The focus is to automate routine IT so that you can focus on your business. And let me give you a chance to take a quick look and show you where we're at with it, after I explain the highlights of what we're looking at here. So first off, if you opened up your package of stuff that you got when you got here, there was a flyer for it. So you may have already heard a little bit about this. And if you want to know more, I'm available, or the Catapult team's available to talk about this in more detail. But just like the things that I've talked about during the day today, we're focusing on how do we simplify, make things consistent, and automate those routine tasks. Benefits: we want to offload the common tasks that you've got out there. What's a differentiator on this is the fact that we fully manage this solution. To take that left side, right side analogy that I mentioned before, taking the list of things that you want to focus on, this is just one big thing you can take off your list that you don't have to focus on, and we fully manage and maintain it for you. And it's designed as an extendable platform so that we start with the one key piece that we're providing today, but the goal is, in essence, we will work with our clients to identify what are the next most important automations that you need in your environment so we can add those to the portfolio and then automate those off for you as well. So with that, let's go into a first level demo for user onboarding. All right, so I'm in Launch. This is a Service Manager UI. We're adding Carl the robot as an intern. And we're going to choose his manager. I think we're going with Alan here. All right. Good. And then next, we're going to put their office. We're going to enable their account and choose a group. And Carl is going into our help desk group. All right, so with that, I'm going to check that and submit. Now, this is just standard Service Manager with a form that we put on top of it, nothing too surprising. And here is a quick look at Active Directory. So in here, what we've got is we have a launch OU that we've created, a series of different accounts that exist out there. And the thing of note that we're looking at for today is the fact that there is no Carl robot in existence in that particular environment. Now, so let's step back and think about what we were showing there, and let me talk the rest of the way through this process. So what we've done with Launch is this. We take your current help desk system, we build activities that allow you to be able to communicate with Launch, we automate the activities that you want, and we come back to your ticketing system and we let your ticketing system know we completed this for you successfully. If there's a problem, since it's a fully managed solution, we notify our team for resolution, work through the resolution to get it to a successful completion. So that allows us to be able to take the tasks that you would have to manually go through and automate those processes. Now what we're doing, and I'll show a really cool demo, something nobody's seen in OMS at the end of the session, but what we're doing here that's very interesting is we're also leveraging the power of OMS. So as we take these tasks, let's say I'm onboarding Carl the robot in this example, I'm writing not only to my regular logging capabilities, but I'm also logging into your tenant in Azure, into your instance of OMS. So that if you log into OMS, you have your ability to be able to see within your dashboards anything that you've asked Launch to go do for you. So, you're the manager for Carl the robot, and you want to actually find out, did he get, provisioned correctly? Did the things happen that it was supposed to happen? That's exactly where you can find out. So if we take a look at that, now this has obviously been time delayed. You can see my Carl the robot here, and notice he is a member of Help Desk. So Carl was created, not too surprising, okay, and allows us to be able to see that he was created and he was added into a group. All right, relatively straightforward. But if I'm in your chair right now, this is what I'm saying. Yeah, can I just kind of right-click and add a user into Active Directory? It's a good question. Now, without even getting to the logistics of the fact of how do you actually track that and how do you actually keep track of when a user account's created and did they do it right, let's hit what we actually did here. So we did adding the user to Active Directory. Okay, like I said, not too big. What about Office 365? So we need to be able to provision somebody who could exist here or could exist here. All right, I need to create an Exchange mailbox. I need them to be mailbox enabled as well. There's processes associated with that. I need them added into distribution lists and groups. You're beginning to see the process of what this looks like. I got to tell them what their temporary password is, because if they don't have their temporary password, how are they supposed to log in? And then I'm providing full accountability and auditability of every single step that we've taken within this. So the way we built this solution is in a series of reusable modules where we say for your particular client, this is, do you have Exchange in your environment? If so, which version of Exchange do you have? If so, which Exchange server are we going to communicate with to make sure that it's working the way that you want it to work? So it's customized to your particular environment, but built on reusable modules that we built to do this. Includes full mobile access. It's also, as I said, customized to your business environment. So your environment may very well have Lync or other things that you need provisioned as well. No problem, those are the types of things we do. And as I mentioned, this is fully managed by Catapult. So once we've defined those processes, once we put this in place, this becomes as simple as you create the ticket, the activities take care of it from there, and you're done with it. Effortlessly, consistently, and bluntly put, even during our test so far, pretty darn quickly. So that is what Launch is designed to do. It's designed to empower you to do more with less. Now, I've shown a little bit of the user pieces, but what I've been holding on is something that I wanted to be able to showcase in a little bit more depth here. All right, so I'm on the Launch client right now. So for those of you who are familiar with OMS, OMS runs on not only an HTML5 portal that you can get to, but there's also iPad, Android, Windows Phone apps. I'm running on an Android right now. And from in here, I opened up my dashboard for my particular client, and I can see how many automation requests have I had, how many were successful, where did we have errors, detail level logging of what's occurred. If I open up what I'm calling recent robot requests, i.e. the requests that I put in so far to provision somebody of Carl's name, what we see here is that robot is actually highlighted within this text. So we can actually see the detail level all the way down to the particular user that's being provided, again, running on your mobile device. Now, everything that I've shown here so far is built out of the box. So if you have OMS right now, you can use the mobile stuff, you can build your own dashboards, you can see this. What you're going to see here in a second is something that you haven't seen anywhere else yet, which is how do we visualize your data within a solution? So while this is loading, when Jeremy did his session, he showed all of the different solutions that Microsoft's working on and said, coming soon and things of that nature. And you could see what was up and coming. So what we've got here is a solution that we've put together. And our solution allows us to be able to visualize that type of data that we're putting, again, into your particular OMS environment. And this is the scary part of running live demos, when you actually wonder if it's going to populate. So 1 second, we'll try that one more time. And we will refresh and give that a second to load. Oh, let's hit that again. So we go back into overview. So within here, what we're going to see, there we go. So how many total requests have we had so far? Again, but now we can dig into the details. So in here, I can see how many requests, and then down below is what types of requests. So if we're going to do new user onboarding, if we're going to be using terminations, changes, any of those type of stuff, you can easily see a breakdown of which ones are out there. You can also see your results quickly, graphically, and intuitively. How many of my automations were successful? How many of them failed? How many of them went into a warning state? And then finally, all the way down to when Jeremy was showing us before the examples of all the way down to the logging levels. Since we're using the OMS framework, we can do those exact same type of queries that Jeremy showed us, the ones that Dieter showed us before, all on your mobile device or on your HTML5 web browser, however you want to be able to surface this type of data. So I owe a huge thanks, by the way, to the Microsoft development team for OMS for allowing us to put this together. So thank you guys, you know who you are. So with that, and I know I'm running out of time, so today's focus has been on how do we do more with less. We all know we got this kind of rock and a hard place type analogy of what's out there. I talked about some of the strategies to win. Maximize by using the tool sets you already own. Work with SMEs because you don't have to do everything on your own. Offload the things that you don't have to do within your IT organization. Embrace the cloud. And then finally, automate your common tasks. find the things that you're doing on a daily basis that you can offload, pull them together, and let that be something that you don't have to do on a daily basis. So with that, I do believe I'm done. So thank you all.